Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron, and it is my privilege to host this show where I get to talk to folks from all over the world who are education thought leaders and innovators. We'll hear inspiring stories from educators, EdTech founders, AI experts, and others who are fearlessly innovating and delivering unique learning experiences. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started.
And so when I look ahead to a future with AI, knowledge acquisition is not the currency that you need anymore to be successful, because now we have all of this information available at our fingertips. And what is going to be needed are those soft skills, those human intelligences. And so the movement is about creating awareness to start to prioritize those skills for career readiness in our students.
That is Dr. Michelle Ament. She is the co-president of the Human Intelligence Movement and a veteran educator and expert in experiential learning. In this episode, we're going to talk about how we can promote human intelligence in a world with artificial intelligence. Keep listening. Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron, and today I am joined with Michelle Ament. She's an education pioneer renowned for creating the LXP model, that's learning experience model. She leads education systems to develop human intelligence and champions responsive pedagogy, supporting educators to design relevant and authentic learning experiences in real world impact. Michelle is also the co-president of the Human Intelligence Movement. The mission of the Human Intelligence Movement is to ensure that all students have the skills to thrive and succeed in an AI world. They do this by building awareness, solving problems as a community, and impacting policymaking. So welcome to the show, Michelle. This is going to be fun.
Thanks for having me, Eric. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, we're going to talk all things human intelligence, I guess. So
let's go.
Yeah. So I do have kind of an icebreaker in mind, just to get us loosened up a little bit and kind of thinking about the distinction between machine thinking and human intelligence. So what I'd like you to do, if you can think of one, is an experience you've had that AI could never possibly understand how you were feeling. So, we learn through experiences, and I know you do a lot of work around experiential learning. So, do you think you have an example there? Please, nothing embarrassing, just something an experience you've had that was really memorable, maybe you learned from, but that AI could never even pretend really to understand it.
That's a great question. And I'm trying to think of a really specific or concrete example. And all I can think of is really all the times when I've had to interact with other people or been in a group setting and learned from others. And so, I think about whether it is like strategic planning, where a group of people come together with different perspectives and bring their lived experiences and their beliefs and values into the room, and to watch that strategic planning or that deciding of who do we want to be as an organization. I've seen that in a school district I've been in the company I work for, and even within the human intelligence movement, really watching us come together to figure out who do we want to be, what do we stand for, and what matters. And I've done some vision casting with an AI bot to kind of help me think of how might I phrase this. And it always is single perspective, where the experience that I've had when you bring multiple people together, especially diverse perspectives, you get just a whole different set of learning that happens. And so I think that would be for me the learning experience that really stands apart from AI, is anything that involves kind of that human connection, that need to learn from one another. But most importantly, what comes from collaboration and collective ideas coming together to create something.
Okay. Yeah, there's no wrong answers to this. That was good. So I was thinking about it for myself too, and I thought, well, what have I experienced that I can't imagine AI could capture this? And I went
Mhm.
a completely different direction. What I thought of was the first time I ever went snorkeling. Um,
Okay.
I was like 10 years old. And so for me, this was a highly sensory experience, right? This was in the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas. And I was probably about 10 years old. You get in the water, right? And you're getting kind of splashed around and stuff. But that moment that you submerge, right? And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, the sound of, everything above the surface kind of disappears immediately. And, so there's that very kind of quiet thing. Of course, you have to stop breathing because you're under the water. So it gets very still. So even the motion changes, the sound
Mhm.
changes, the light changes. And as you go in, it's just this whole alien world. It's just such a rush. And I think of that first time I ever experienced, trying to get down, 10 feet in the water or whatever, down underneath the surface, and there's little fish swimming around. And you notice the change in the temperature of the water because it gets cooler as you get below the
Mhm.
surface there. So anyway, I think of experiences like that. It's like just this kind of overload. But the other thing from an emotional state was both the exhilaration of kind of, seeing this whole new world that, when you're above the water, you see the surface and, you know, you don't see much detail. And then you get below and it's alive, right? There's all these things swimming around and, corals and it's a whole new world. But there's also a little bit of fear, right? You realize I
Yeah.
could drown. I'm under the water. I can't breathe. I have to get back up to the surface, right, in order to breathe again. And
Right.
so it's that kind of dynamic of, joy and excitement and adventure, but at the same time, a little bit of fear that, I got to be careful here. There's danger here, are there sharks in the water, kind of thing. And I think of this as the way, humans process things, right? And a million inputs all at once,
Mm.
yet we somehow can distinguish it. And I can remember a lot of details of that feeling that first time of being in the ocean and say going under the water in the ocean and swimming around amongst the fish.
That really resonates for me, especially the part around the emotions you feel. I think about oftentimes I can remember times and places of things that happened, and it is because I think the emotion is driving it, whether it's fear, whether it's joy,
Mhm.
whether it's a sense of awe or a sense of just feeling really successful. You can kind of think about moments in time, those human emotions really cement experiences for us. So, I think that's an interesting idea that AI doesn't, to me, doesn't have that same sense of emotion, that emotional intelligence that allows us to really fully feel experiences. Because I was thinking a little bit about virtual reality in the future, like where we might go. And I was like, oh, well, we could create experiences where people go underwater and see the coral and the fish. And I'm sure they already exist, right? But I don't know that you'd ever get that sense of emotion that you described to really feel what it feels like. You might see it, there might be maybe even a bit of sensory piece to it, but it's that emotion, that fear, the joy that I don't know that we can replicate.
Yeah. Well, it's like even you go to a big aquarium, right? Um,
Mhm.
you walk around, right? And you can see the fish and you kind of get a little bit of this sense. But what you don't get is that, say, the quiet, right? As
Right.
soon as you're under the water, you can't hear anything anymore. You hear your own heartbeat, right?
Hmm.
It's that kind of quiet. And then the coldness of the water, the
Yeah.
sensation of kind of floating, almost flying, that you get when you're, in the water like that, suspended in the water. You don't
Mhm.
get any of that sensory stuff. It's all kind of visual when you're in an aquarium. And so to me, that's almost that comparison, right? The AI can kind of imagine, if you will, at a very kind of one-dimensional level, right?
Right.
And if it tries to emulate emotion, it usually does that on a very binary kind of thing. You're scared or you're happy or you're sad. But that say mixed kind of state that we get in as humans,
Right.
where we can feel multiple emotions all at the same time. I don't think AI has any realm of or anything close to that anytime soon in being able
Mhm.
to kind of express that kind of scenario, which is important, I think, to us. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was fun. Thank you for
Mhm.
um, joining me on that little adventure, and memory for me is great memories as a kid. So, all right, before we get too far here into the human intelligence movement thing, I want to baseline our definition of human intelligence. So I specifically intentionally used a phrase able to understand, right? That AI can't understand our emotions necessarily. So I believe, right? So understanding is kind of core to intelligence, right? And I used as reference here as I prepared for this. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Dr. Rose Luckin, she published a book in 2018 titled Machine Learning and Human Intelligence, The Future of
Mm.
Education in the 21st Century. Are you
Mhm.
happen to be familiar with Dr. Luckin and her work?
I'm actually not, and I'm writing down the citation right now because I want to check it out for sure.
Actually, that book is a PDF. I can send it to you if you
Okay.
want. It's wonderful. And say written in 2018. She's been doing AI and human intelligence work for like 30 years, long
Right.
before generative AI hit. Um,
Mhm.
but what I also did for comparison, because I was familiar with her work and I had the privilege of hearing her speak a few times, is I went and I looked for, who else is kind of renowned authority, if you will, on human intelligence. And I came
Mhm.
across Robert J. Sternberg. Are you familiar with
Okay.
him? So he's
No.
okay. Sorry. He's got some writing out there. He calls it his archic theory, and the way he describes it. What I found interesting and validating was that his definition of human intelligence was really close, very much aligned with Dr. Luckin's writing, absent the focus on AI that Dr. Luckin
Mhm.
has. So, all right, so you're not familiar with either of those two. Where does your definition of human intelligence come from?
That's a great question. And I am excited to go learn more about the research, the theory behind it. And I think really where the definition of human intelligence came from for me is really what are the human qualities that exist in a world of AI when we think about things like being able to be creative, being able to communicate really well with people, build relationships, being able to be curious, being able to, like we talked about, feel emotion. So I think as for me, it really became this thought process around as AI continues to replace some of the tasks and some of the work that we are doing in our day-to-day lives, what then it opens up space to do more of something else. And so, what is that something else? And so, I started to think about how do we become more connected as humans? And then, what are those intelligences that we need in order to be more connected? Be more collaborative, be more innovative. And that really falls in that's where I started to begin to define what is human intelligence. I think you bring up a really great question that our movement is really wanting to figure out is how do we define this? And some of it is a little unknown as AI continues to evolve rapidly. Like we thought at one point AI couldn't be as creative as humans, but we're starting to see some outputs of creativity that can mirror what humans are capable of. So then it's going a little bit deeper to think about, okay, if AI can produce this level of creativity, what does that mean for humans and creativity, and how does it open up a space that's deeper? And we need to then explore how do we elevate the capabilities that humans have in the human intelligences. So I think, my definition is probably not as formal as the researchers, the people that you talk about. And it's really more about what are those human-centered qualities that we believe will transcend technology, and then how do we start to name those and figure out ways to elevate them with humans.
Yeah. Well, I think there's some very, common understandings too around, cognitive abilities, right?
Right.
So creative thinking, well, you mentioned creativity and, well, problem solving, analytical communication, collaboration, right? These are
Mhm.
all kind of that core set of skills. But there's a lot of concern right now, which is why, the work you're doing kind of caught my attention too, was because so many people are talking about this right now. The
Right.
fear that AI is going to dumb us down and people, are going to stop thinking about things and really, going that next level of what human intelligence to me is all about, right? And
Mhm.
our ability to um, emotionally respond to something and be curious and ask the right questions. So, right, tell me
Yeah,
more
and
about why you're doing this and what you hope to accomplish.
sure. I was thinking a little bit about, when I think about human intelligence, there is that IQ aspect, but more importantly, I think there's that EQ, that emotional intelligence aspect. When I think about human intelligence, what the movement is all about is like you said, there is this sense of fear that AI will replace our jobs, our work, dumb us down, where what we're trying to do is really focus on how do we build the human intelligences that students need to thrive in an AI world. And so when we think about the current education system, it's my belief that we're very focused on knowledge acquisition. We are kind of stuck in this delivery of information. Here's the information you need to know. And this is what it means to be college career ready, is when you have demonstrated that you have acquired this level of knowledge. And I think our school system has also said these human intelligences, these durable skills, the soft skills are important as well. I don't believe that we have prioritized them to the same degree as we have prioritized knowledge acquisition. And so when I look ahead to a future with AI, knowledge acquisition is not the currency that you need anymore to be successful, because now we have all of this information available at our fingertips. And what is going to be needed are those soft skills, those human intelligences. And so the movement is about creating awareness to start to prioritize those skills for career readiness in our students, for both today and the future. I think about, so part of it, you at the front of this podcast, you talked about what the mission is and why we do what we do. So it's really to ensure all students can thrive in an AI world with human intelligence. And we do that through creating awareness, through solving problems, and really impacting policy. I think right now our school system is stuck in holding schools accountable to that knowledge acquisition. And it is important that we balance that with some policy that says kids need to have these durable skills, these human intelligences. How are you going to ensure that they have those when they graduate from your K-12 system? And so that's part of the policy that we're trying to shape. One of the things, though, that's interesting, Eric, is as this group comes together, they are big thinkers, and they are thinking beyond just the K-12 school system and starting to think about how do we ensure that industry businesses are upskilling around human intelligences? What does it mean for higher education and human intelligence? So it's a fascinating thing to watch more from just an initial vision that we had when Travis and I brought the human intelligence movement to life, to see kind of those other perspectives coming to play in shaping what our world needs as we look to the age of AI.
Yeah, which brings me to another kind of point because we haven't really established. So where are you, and is there any particular school or school system you're associated with?
So I live in the Minneapolis area of Minnesota. So I've lived here for 30 years. So I'm born and raised in the Midwest. And I have, throughout my career, I've been an elementary teacher, I've been a building leader, I've been a district leader. most recently really focused on leading as the senior director of personalized learning. So looking at how in a school district can we personalize learning to ensure that it's equitable and meets the needs of every student in the district. So I had 25 years of experience in education, of moving through my work as a, like I said, as a teacher up to a district administrator. And then now I'm the chief academic officer at ProSolve, which is a company focused on creating curriculum and programs that really build skills in students. We call it the modern approach to social emotional learning, really feeling like that teachers and schools need resources and curriculum in order to build social emotional skills. And we do that through experiential learning, which is a unique approach to social emotional skill building. And so that's a little bit about where I live, who I am. So I've had this opportunity to be an educator, be a district decision maker, and now work for a company that is trying to make change in the education space by offering a unique way of teaching and learning. And so the movement really came as this desire for me to have a really strong impact on education reform. As I've been an educator, I've been in the classroom, feeling the constraints that the system has as a district administrator, trying to push paradigms, but also feeling constraints by what I've come to realize is really the system is stuck against some of the policies that have been made. And so the human intelligence movement for me was an opportunity to create a grassroots organization that could start to make some change in our school system. And also, I kind of go back to what I said in the beginning, something that I thrive on is this idea of a collective community coming together to solve really wicked problems. Like I'm only one person trying to do that, but if I can rally a lot of people together, we can do really amazing things. So I'm really driven by that desire to create an organic community that can make change.
Yeah, no, well, I love the idea that you called it a movement, right?
Mhm.
Because this is kind of where we are, right? We're all in this same boat, and this is one of the things I experience in doing the podcast is, I'm talking to people, last week it was Spain and UK and Germany. I had a guest this month from Australia. But we're all going through the same stuff, the same anxiety about AI's impact, the same frustrations in some cases around schools and curriculums and policy that's constraining what we can do. But what I'm also seeing is lots of people finding a way, right? They're getting a foot in the door here somewhere, and they're experimenting, they're innovating, they're doing new things. And some of it's kind of forced upon teachers at this point, right? This AI thing just exploded on the scene and kind of rocked the world for a lot of teachers. And because the schools weren't able to set policy, the teachers, many of them, just kind of took the bull by the horns and did their own thing, right? Trying to
Right.
figure out what to do. So now, though, I think we're getting more towards that time where we can start to get all those people who've now been playing with things and feeling the impact of AI. Hopefully they're getting past this obsession with its cheating
Yeah.
and okay, let's move on now and go forward. And I do think that the real issue is this the real issue with the AI is not the cheating, it's how do we emphasize the human intelligence, the human skills, those skills um, that allow us to use the AI to augment what we do, not replace it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Definitely. Right.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so talk to me in more practical terms. What are some of the things you guys are actually doing? Where are you having an impact?
Well, we are just getting started with the movement launched really mid-April. I was at the ASU GVS conference and I talked to a couple of people at that event and started to get some interest. I said, we're starting this movement and are you interested in joining us? And I had a handful of people mid-April that were interested. And now we have over 100 founding members and over 1,000 followers on LinkedIn. So to me, those are really big numbers in a
Yeah.
short amount of time. I continue to be really surprised by how many people want to be a part of this. And so some of the things that we are doing right now is just providing that thought leadership. So we have a human intelligence blog where different contributors are writing about what is human intelligence and why does it matter and how can we do more of it in our classrooms and in our schools. And I think that's the key part is being able to offer solutions like how do I make this a reality? And so that has been great to see different resources being provided to people to think about how could I do more of this work. We are speaking at different conferences and podcasts like this to spread the message. And we have a group that has started to really kind of define what is human intelligence mean, why is it important? And from that, we'll start to see a framework of here are the human intelligences that we will need in the age of AI and beginning to create awareness around how do we prioritize those. So it is a very, very, I'll say it's a nonprofit organization that we have our 3-year plan to have a board established and be able to run like a formal nonprofit organization. I will say right now, it is a very grassroots organic movement where just like I mentioned, I asked some people to come along with me, and it's kind of snowballed into now I've got a lot of people coming along with me. So the next step is to really find some leaders that are willing to take on different projects and generate ideas from the group. And it really doesn't have like, for me, I've talked about what are the end goals, but I don't know what the path is. And so I'm looking for the members of this organization to help define the journey along the way to get to that end goal. So it's really exciting in that way that the path is unknown. And I think that's really important right now because our world is changing so rapidly and what it means to live in the age of AI is changing so rapidly. And even as you mentioned, what the impact on schools, I don't think we've even realized the impact that AI will have. And less, I'm less worried about the impact and I'm more focused on what opportunity now do we have? And so how do we seize this opportunity? That's, I think, the biggest thing that I'm trying to think about is as AI starts to become more prevalent in with teachers and in classrooms, what can it do? What sort of tasks can it replace that allow teachers to do what they are designed to do best, which is be in relationship with students? And so I think that's just one example of an opportunity where our teachers are, kind of buried under some of the bureaucracy, the emailing, the paperwork, the crunching data with assessments, just all kinds of things. How could AI free an opportunity? How could it free them up to then be in more relationships with students?
Yeah. Well, the other thing that occurs to me there too, and you talked actually earlier, you commented on, personalized learning and SEL, right? Social
Yeah.
emotional learning. And to me, I think of this, and when we start talking about human intelligence, uh, it's not, to me, it's not curriculum, right? It's very personal. It's,
Mhm.
it's a set of skills and superpowers, right, that we have, and we all have them to different degrees and different ways. And, it's not about, cookie cutter, oh, I've got this, new course now that teaches you, how to do creative thinking or critical thinking or whatever, right? I think that it's something that when awareness is more there of what this means and how it is demonstrated and developed, that it layers into everything, right? From K through 12 to university to, learning and development programs and corporations, right? That it's we all need to be more kind of aware of these skills and how they demonstrate themselves, right? So how do we encourage curiosity, right?
Right.
Kids do it naturally, right? Historically, we've beat it out of them by the time that, you know,
Yeah.
through K through 12, right? We've tried to dampen their spirits and creativity and curiosity because we need them to get through those standard tests and,
Right.
sit in your, chair in your row and be quiet, and take all this information, right? Knowledge transfer that we're trying to do so you can, get a high enough score so the school doesn't get dinged.
Absolutely. And so that, of course, we are prioritizing that. I mean, I remember being a classroom teacher that I work to capitalize on teachable moments and create opportunities for students to be curious and to build those skills. And that was several years ago. And since then, we've gotten heavier, put more and more pressure on teachers to reduce time for the extra, what is called the extra things, so that you can cover content,
Mm.
complete the scope and sequence in order to have these high scores on high stakes assessments. But what I think we miss along the way is when students are able to really discover something that's meaningful to them or relevant to them, there is a deeper sense of learning that happens than just covering content. I think one thing I was thinking about when you were talking was around the skills and mindsets. So when we think about human intelligence, I think a lot about there's a skill of communication, being able to synthesize my ideas, share them in a really clear way, be able to ask you questions and listen to what your responses are. Like, I think those are skills that you build through practice and application and reflection. And then there's something about mindsets, like being able to feel like I can persevere and not being afraid to fail and being able to try something and take a risk. To me, that's less of a skill that I need to develop and more of a mindset. And I think like being curious and wanting to discover new things is a mindset. And there's some skills that we teach that support the mindset. But I do think there's something to like to both skills and mindsets that we need to be aware of, because I agree with you, Eric. Our school system right now has pushed the development of some of those mindsets to the side, curiosity being one of them, the willingness to take a risk and fail in work is another one. And so I think being really cognizant of what mindsets are we going to need. Another one for an AI world is being adaptable with things changing so rapidly in information. What I know today is not the same as what I need to know next week. And that rapid adaptation, I think, is going to be important. We've kind of been, you learned your information, you went to work, and you did your job for a number of years with that. And there wasn't this need to adapt rapidly in your day-to-day work. And I think building that skill set with kids is something we need to be thinking about as well.
Yeah. So I'm just going to throw something out there as an example for me of one of the concerns, something I see with AI that concerns me. So my
Okay.
example is Perplexity. I don't know if you've used perplexity.ai. I absolutely
Just
love it. Yeah.
I used it this morning.
Oh, good. Okay. So I use it for research stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I have found I now keep a tab open all the time and I'm throwing stuff at it and just going, tell me about this, right? Well, I need to process this. I need more information, right? And it goes and pulls together some resources and stuff. But one thing I hate about it, and I think this is one of the traps we can get into with AI if we're not careful, is what Perplexity does is so you kind of ask it a question, right? And it goes out and it pulls some stuff together and it gives you a summary. But then it also immediately gives you potential follow-up questions.
Right.
And I have learned to, I kind of scroll through the response and then I immediately stop to make sure I don't see its
Mm.
questions because I want to have the time to kind of process what information and come up with my own questions, because I believe it's that ability, right, to come up with more questions, right, that's really critical thinking. That's I got to be able to do that analysis. I need time to process. I'm not as fast as AI, right?
Mhm.
But I want to be able to process that. And I equate it to, well, I play games. Game, if you've listened to any of my podcasts, you know I talk a lot
Mhm.
about games and learning.
Right.
So, but one of the things some games will do is they're designed to give you hints, right?
Mhm.
But it drives me crazy when I'm playing a game and it gives me hints without me asking for them, right? It's like,
Mhm.
no, I want to figure this out. I don't want you to tell me, I want you to wait for me. And if I'm really stuck, I'll ask for help. But I feel like perplexity is doing a little bit of that, right? It's not waiting to see if I want some help with additional questions or follow-up questions I might ask. It just and spits out half a dozen, questions. And so I think this is where we have to be careful with the tools as teachers, right? To say, kind of cut it off before it tries to think for you or tries to tell you what to think, right? Just give me the information, let me process that, let me think about what questions does that raise for me, right? Use my human intelligence now to respond to it and think about it. So anyway, that's just kind of a rant from me, but it's one of my fears in an AI world where we could get dumbed down because we let it do that for us.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I hadn't thought about that with perplexity, but I see exactly what you're talking about. I mean, I used it this morning and it gave me some information and then it obviously gave me some more questions and I was like, "Oh yeah, how does that work in an organization?" And oh, what do I need to think about with that? And so then I was curious and went to those questions and read about that information. But what it didn't allow me to do is take in information, reflect on it, process it, think about how is this information meaningful to me? What more information? What curiosities did it spark for me that made me want to go investigate more? And I think I haven't really thought too much about this idea of AI dumbing down. I've thought more about becoming dependent on AI. And they're probably very similar in this idea that if a tool like that in with our learners or anyone, you start to become dependent. And now I don't need to think of those questions. I don't need to continue to expand and think critically because it's so automated. It becomes it's I think there's for me that fear of becoming dependent on it, which probably is very similar to what you're saying about being dumbed down because now I don't have to work that intelligence. I don't have to think critically. I will say, one of the things that I do a lot of, anytime I'm doing I do a lot of writing, and anytime I'm doing writing, I'm using AI to help me brainstorm and think through. But I've really thought about how that actually elevates my thinking because now I have to take these ideas and kind of put them and revise it and put it into really making sense of what I want to say. And I feel like it's pushed me to really have to evaluate what's the outputs and really synthesize it. And so I feel like for me, when I do any kind of work generation, whether it's writing or putting some ideas together, it actually has pushed my thinking further than just sitting with a blank paper, having to generate it the first go, because I feel like sometimes there gets to be a fatigue, whether it's time or just mental fatigue of coming up with the ideas, starting to write just what it is that sometimes you don't get to those higher order thinking skills because of time or fatigue. So I feel like it's pushed me in that way. I don't know if you've experienced that.
Yeah. Well, one example for me, I had a friend send me a link to a game. It's an AI powered role play game, Dungeons and Dragons themed.
Okay.
And it was just amazing experience for me. You're talking about one of those kind of new experiences that opens your eyes. In this case, it was an experience with AI. But what was fascinating for me was that I felt like, so you kind of like co-author a story with the AI. So what
Mhm.
happens is the AI plays the dungeon master kind of role, but it doesn't just like dictate the story. It constantly asks you for input, right? What do you want to
Mhm.
do? Who do you want to be? Where do you want to go? Right. And so what I found was it kind of unleashed my own creativity
Mhm.
because I would kind of, I'm thinking, about this, and it would go, okay. And off it would go, and it would embellish all this stuff and create characters and scenes and people for me to interact with. And it would come up with magical items or, you know, but the more it did, the more I kind of went, oh yeah, I can work with that, right? So let
Mhm.
me, I can add this twist to it, or at times even saying to the AI, no, 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 I don't want to go there yet. I want to finish
Right.
this part. Let's spend some more time here, before
Mhm.
we go on. And or it's sometimes just saying, I don't want to be done with the story yet. let's
Mhm.
let's
Mhm.
have some more adventure, right? But I was amazed at how, say, I felt more creative because the AI was kind of helping me be creative, right?
It was.
Encouraging me to be creative and think of, things, giving me ideas. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, that sounds like a really fun experience. I know a lot of people who would enjoy that. So you'll have to share the link or tell me more about that.
Yeah.
And I think just that it's fun to see how the AI didn't replace your creativity, but actually helped you augment it. And I think
Mm.
that to me is like part of the synergy between human intelligence and artificial intelligence, and that becomes less about like shifting that school of thought to how do we create synergy between our human intelligences and AI can begin to replace that fear of AI or that fear of it's going to dumb down or dominate. And it's making me think a little bit back to the perplexity example around how the makers of AI, how do we get them involved in this conversation of how do you create synergy versus optimizing the AI? And, I know there's a lot of chatter right now about just that the for-profit companies, of course, they're going to want to make the most effective product for profit rather than think about how does what I'm doing maybe diminish the human intelligences. So it's an interesting thing to think about the forces pushing of the companies creating these AIs, people saying that we need more human intelligence, and then even this conversation of how do we find the synergy between AI and HI.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's another aspect here too, in terms of kind of the ethical use of things too, and
Mhm.
saying, the output from AI should not be the product itself, right?
Right.
It should be something I can use, right, to, as your example, right? You kind of bouncing ideas and it helps you do something better. The problem we get into ethically for me is when a company says, "Oh, I'm not going to hire a writer anymore because I've got this junior person who I can, throw some stuff over to him and he couldn't possibly write it on his own, but he can prompt AI and AI will write it for him and then we'll just publish that." Right.
Yeah.
And that could
Right.
be marketing material or, whatever, my annual report, just throw my, accounting system at the, AI and have it write my annual report for me. Done.
Yeah.
Right. I can fire my accountants now. Right? you know, these are the things I also worry about in terms of the impact on jobs. But I worry, and I know I see this a lot too, the the worry about acceptance of mediocrity, right? So we were talking at
Mm.
the beginning about those experiences, right? That AI doesn't have any experiences. It doesn't feel any emotions. So, when it does try to do something creative, it's kind of faking it. But for some companies, they're going to look at it and go, well, a fake is cheap and fast. I'll throw that out there rather than pay an artist or, pay somebody to create a song. Just throw it in the system and let the system create some, fun little song. And, when we're done, right? Good to go. And I hate that. Right. No, it's one thing to help me be more creative, stimulate me, give me some ideas, but then I need to go execute on those ideas. And when the final product is human centered, augmented by AI, as opposed to AI did it and maybe there was some human oversight. We've got to keep the human in the center of that activity and that product, right? Whatever I'm putting out, whatever I'm creating should be centered on the human and their activity and their feelings and their emotions and their experiences, and augmented by AI. And so I'm hoping that's part of what movements like the human intelligence movement, right, are focusing on, and communicating to people, saying, keep the human in the center, and we, augment. It's a tool, it helps you, but you still got to create. You still got to think. You got to come up with the questions to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's really you're pushing me to think about just the conversation I was in yesterday around this movement doing more than just a focus on education. And that's a really big that's a really big thing. But there was just so I don't mean to minimize it with just staying focused on education because that's a huge undertaking. But I think it's just I think what I'm hearing from you that's compelling is this overarching focus on the human at the center and those human intelligences being in the middle and not being too dependent on AI. I was just thinking if the industry didn't buy the product from the people that had the, poor, I don't know. I'm completely lost my train of thought. So
I think you were talking about kind of being punished by the market, right? So if
thank
I'm
you. Right.
settling, right, for
Yeah.
mediocre product because it was cheap and easy with AI, right, the market may punish me. It's always going to be mediocre compared to getting artists to do it, right? But how do we strike that balance of, say, not firing all the creative people and just using AI because it can do it quickly, even though it's always going to be of lesser quality. So
Yeah, you bring up in the work that I do with ProSolve, we create immersive experiences that are game based, that have a high degree of storytelling and animation. And it's something we've grappled with. We have a whole team of creatives that we prioritize because they bring that human element to the work. And we've tried to do things with AI and it comes out good, but it isn't exceptional. And so, there's the sense that we feel that we want that exceptional experience for kids. And there's a high degree of integrity behind that. But it does make me wonder about that quick and fast or cheap and fast mentality from companies. And then how does the end user, the person that is purchasing, differentiate between companies that maintain a high level of integrity around their services or their products versus companies that are just in it for the profit. And so that's an interesting thing to think about going forward.
yeah. Well, let's go back to mindset. So you talked
Okay.
about, mindset earlier, and I think this is one of the keys, right? If early on, right, if we can teach kids as they're coming up this mindset of human-centered creation augmented by, AI. I'm still in
Mhm.
charge. I'm still making the decisions. I'm still doing the thinking. I'm coming up with the, the problem, right? You may help me with the answer, right? Or the ideas, but it's still a human problem, right? That I'm trying to
Ah,
solve, right? And so, but if they get this kind of mindset that this is how things are done, hopefully they take that forward with them into the workplace later, right? They come with that attitude that no, 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 I don't work for the AI where I'm just a
right.
prompt engineer and and AI puts out the product. No, that's not how it works. I'm responsible for the product and AI may help me, do it to my specifications and with my input. And so, I think that is something we have to develop. And because AI kind of hit us all at the same time at all ages and in the workplace or in school, I think we all have to kind of try to get to that mindset now. right? We get the young kids
Yeah,
coming up, but we got to catch the other ones that are already hard and fast in some other mentality and get them to adopt a new mindset that this is how you best ethically and productively use AI,
mhm.
human centered AI helping.
That I absolutely love this, Eric. I like this is one of the things that I love about being in conversations like this. And it just like it's that snowball effect, right? Like we started talking about mindsets, and now here we are, think like with a human-centered mindset around the human intelligence first and in synergy with AI. But I think you're right on different levels as a from a K-12 lens, but even in our workplace and just our daily lives, just centering us in that it starts with the human experience. It starts with the human at the center, and then AI is our tools that we can use. And I think that people believe that, like, of course, like if I said that to someone, like, of course that's how it would be. AI is just a tool, and of course I'm going to use it when it makes sense. But I think there's been so much coming at us that I worry we've lost some of that perspective a little bit, and being taken, some things are being taken over really rapidly. The pace of change is so quick that I'm not sure that we have stopped to think about, of course, humans would be at the center.
Yeah.
So we need to be reminded of that.
Yeah. Well, and people will cheat and,
Mhm.
find shortcuts and do things badly. There's also the evil players out there, the people who will use AI to generate deep fakes. And,
Right.
sadly, it's really good at that too. If you want to use
Well,
it for nefarious purposes, you can do that. Yeah.
haven't we always had that in our world?
Uh-huh.
So it's like being now it just looks a little bit different, comes through in a different way. So being mindful of that is really important. So the new learning is the ways that it comes out. But I think we've had unethical people and unethical choices all through humanity and the
Yeah.
history of humanity. So
Yeah. I just think it is part of the education at this point on what
absolutely.
AI can do, what it should be used for, what it shouldn't be used for. And the more aware we all are, um, yeah, they talk about
Yep.
AI literacy, but
Right.
it's part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where my mind was going a little bit with AI literacy, and what does that mean, and how can and I don't know that we're doing a really great job with AI literacy, saying the human is at the center, and making choices, driving the product. So that's something, as I leave today, I'm going to be thinking about and exploring a little bit more, is what is that messaging around AI literacy? Because I think sometimes it's about ethical use of the tool, or effective use of the tool, or thoughts. What are your thoughts on, do you feel like AI literacy encompasses this mindset we're talking about?
Maybe at times depends on who's teaching AI literacy, right? This is
Right.
again,
Yeah,
this
that's
is
a good point.
part of my experience. We got all these different people come, all trying to solve the same problem in their own way, and they all come at it with their own context, their own set of experiences coming in, their biases and whatever. And so, yes, one teacher's version of AI literacy may be completely different than somebody else's version of AI literacy. And I don't know that we have to have a completely common,
Mhm.
definition of what AI literacy means. Again, I think as long as we come at it with the right attitude that, you know, AI can help us, but it shouldn't replace us, right? And we have to understand what it can do, what it, can't do, and what it shouldn't do
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
is all
Yeah.
part of that. Yeah. Cool. So we covered quite a bit of ground. I almost apologize. I talked a lot because I got quite excited on this topic.
Well, it's been enjoyable hearing
Yeah.
your ideas and please don't apologize because I think, I feel like anytime I can be in a conversation where my thinking is pushed and expanded and now I've got, a couple things to go back and look up and think about. And so maybe we come together in a future conversation and
Yeah.
continue the dialogue.
Yeah, I would love that. Another resource, if you haven't used it yet, the World Economic Forum's report,
Mhm.
Jobs of the Future, I think
Yeah.
they call it. Yeah. If you're not familiar with that one, there's some really, really good stuff in there too on the skills that
Mhm.
companies need, that employers will need. If you're just looking for something that kind of reinforces the messaging and say, oh, look, this isn't just us pulling this out of thin air from the World
Right.
Economic,
Yeah,
Forum's
yes,
report.
we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did look very closely at that, but I think to your point, citing that a little bit more to have some credibility in the
Yeah.
messaging would be great.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's always good to have substantial stuff. I will send you the document
Okay,
from Rose. Yeah, it's PDF. It's freely distributed. I didn't steal it.
okay, I'd
And
appreciate that.
yeah, you can have a copy of that. It's a really good read. It's only 167 pages, I think. And it's, yeah, you can read it in a few hours. Um, then it'll twist your brain into knots and you'll have to read it
Good.
again. It is one of those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Not simple concepts, but it's very, very interesting. So, all right. Any last words? Any other thoughts? Anything you wanted to share we didn't give you the opportunity to talk about?
Well, I think that um, folks that are interested in being part of the human intelligence movement, we are, like I mentioned today, just growing really strong and getting some momentum. So if you've got some ideas, some perspectives, some things to contribute, certainly find us at the human intelligence movement and reach out. And I'd love to hear from people who are interested in being at the center of this work. So
Great.
that
Well, I'm
just
already
that,
following you and the movement on LinkedIn. So
right.
I will get your updates and newsletters, I guess, that way. So yeah, I'm looking forward to learning more and watching you guys go have great impact. That's my hope for
Yeah.
what you're doing. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Any support you can provide, that's great. So I appreciate it, Eric. It's been a pleasure talking with you today.
Yeah, this has been fun, and say maybe we'll have another conversation in the future. Maybe we'll bring Travis on and we'll, batter some more ideas around.
I'd love that. It would be a fun conversation. And I think you'd push his thinking just like you've done mine today. So thank you for that.
You have pushed mine too. This is how it works. All right. Well, thank you very much, Michelle.
Thanks.
There were some really important concepts in this discussion. The dialogue we had about mindset and focusing on human-centered creation with AI as a tool on the side, I think is super critical. And I love that the human intelligence movement is growing rapidly and really feels like a grassroots, movement. And as much as I love the kind of academic learning science perspective, and I don't want to diminish the importance of that, I think it's probably equally as important right now to have the input of teachers in classrooms, boots on the ground, as they say. This is where the kids are really going to learn or not going to learn the skills that they need to be productive and successful in a world with AI. If you're enjoying this podcast, and I sincerely hope that you are, please subscribe and share. We've got so many more amazing guests lined up with great stories of innovation and education, and you don't want to miss them. I'm Eric Byron. Thanks for listening to the Education Innovators podcast. To all those education innovators out there, you're doing incredible stuff. You are making a difference.